Welcome to the program, Congressman Smith.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
So it is the last day of the Munich Security Conference. Yesterday you had a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. How did it go and what did you discuss with him?
Well, it went really well. We had 18 members of Congress, a bipartisan delegation from the House. And the president gave us the update on what's going on in Ukraine. And look, we all know what the subject is. Congress needs to pass the aid package for Ukraine. That the Senate passed, now the House needs to pass it. We discussed that, and we discussed conditions in Ukraine as well, certainly in the military, but also on the economic side, and what Ukraine is doing to survive during this war. But the main emphasis is on getting more help and more assistance to the war effort.
Did you hear a grim or optimistic assessment from President Zelensky?
President Zelensky remains optimistic. I mean, look, what the Ukrainian people have been able to accomplish in the last 2 years is truly remarkable. And I remember I was at the Munich Security Conference 2 years ago now when, the war was imminent and everyone assumed that, Russia would be rolling into Kyiv in a matter of weeks. They were stopped, and they were stopped because of the courage and tenacity of the Ukrainian people. And not only have you been able to stop the Russian war effort from taking over the country, but Ukraine has maintained its economic vitality, what they've been able to do in Odessa, continuing to ship grain out. Now, we understand, it's still incredibly tough circumstances, which is why we need to get the aid package to stop Russia from advancing any further and end this war.
Did your delegation make any promise, President Zelensky, on the possible timeline, Ukraine aid to be done?
Yeah, well, it's very frustrating for me. I'm a Democrat. I support the aid package, in a variety of different forms. However the House Republicans would like to bring it up, I'm sure we can get to support. But as of yet, they haven't brought it up. They haven't given us any option. And now we have a bill that has passed the United States Senate with 70 votes, so 70 to 30, or I guess it was 70 to 29, overwhelming bipartisan support. We should have a vote on that in the House. And right now, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is refusing to give us that vote because he has a small far-right element in his caucus that doesn't want to support Ukraine. Then that's fine. They can vote no. And that's the frustrating thing. We have the votes in the House. If that package was put on the floor when we come back, we would pass it with over 300 votes. Easily, but they have to make the decision to put it on the floor. But in this meeting, and there were, 6 or 7 Republicans, 13 or 14 Democrats, the Republicans were just as adamant that we need to pass it as we were. But they got to get it to the floor. They got to give us that vote.
Is there a plan B on how to omit Speaker of the House and put this bill on the floor? Do you personally support a discharge petition?
I do, yes, absolutely. But that's the challenge.
Why?
Well, it's a challenge for a couple of reasons. Number one, discharge petitions take time. It's really complicated, but we have to file on the specific bill, and then a certain number of days have to pass before you can begin to collect signatures. You have to get a majority of the signatures, 218. We have 213 Democrats right now, which means we would need 5 Republicans to sign that. Thus far, only 1 Republican has said that he would. So look, the Republicans who say they support Ukraine aid should sign the discharge petition as soon as possible. But they're holding out and trying to present different ideas. It's very, very frustrating. It's frustrating for me. I can't imagine how frustrating it is for the Ukrainians who are desperate for the military support and the ammunition. It's a complicated process, but it should be simple. We have a bill from the Senate that we could pass. And if you're not going to do that, anything else they do starts the process all over again. And then do you have the votes? Do you get it through the Senate? How does that work? So really, the Republicans, they've been stalling for 6 months now. 6 months, they haven't given us a plan.
Does it mean that due to the position of the Speaker of the House, members of the House, they cannot even express their opinion on the bill and vote yes or no? Does it mean that the work of the House is really blocked? Yeah.
Yes, I know, absolutely. I mean, look, democracy is messy and difficult.
But is it a democracy in such a way when House of Representatives really cannot vote?
Well, I mean, any system of government that requires collective action, you want to call it a democracy, call it whatever you want, as opposed to a dictator simply making the decision. If you set up a system that requires legislative approval, and you can do it a whole bunch of different ways. We have a bicameral legislature. For anything to become law, it has to pass the Senate, has to pass the House, has to be signed by the president, which means that a lot of different people along the way can block that. And in the House, one of the rules we have is the Speaker decides what comes up for a vote. Literally, that one person has the decision-making power as to whether or not something comes to the floor. And the only way around that is to do the discharge petition that we just talked about. But there's a process for the discharge petition. You can't just do it. You got to file it. You got to wait a certain number of days. You got to get the signatures. Then you got to wait another certain number of days before you can bring it up. So it is a time-consuming process. And as I said, thus far, House Republicans, even the House Republicans who say that they support Ukraine aid, have not committed to signing a discharge petition. So either the Speaker's got to bring it up, or we got to sign a discharge petition. And we're pushing on it every day. And President Zelensky really helped deliver the message of the urgency of how important it is to get this done.
Is there a chance to persuade House Speaker to put this bill on the floor?
I would think so. And I've been in conversations with him, as have many others, for a long time. And look, Speaker Johnson has said over and over again that he will not abandon Ukraine. He has said that, all right? And he's trying to figure out how to keep that commitment while not alienating key parts of his Republican caucus. And at some point, he's just got to make a choice to keep that commitment to Ukraine. He has said that, but he's trying to find some way to do it that minimizes what he perceives to be political damage. But time's running out. I mean, we've been having this conversation since, last fall, and they still haven't come up with a plan. So, yes, we're going to try to persuade him to honor his commitment to Ukraine. And certainly, with the murder of Mr. Navalny, it drives home the point. We don't want Putin to be controlling any more people than he already is. What he's doing in Russia is an abomination. The Russian people deserve better, but we certainly don't want him to be able to take over other countries. He's got similar influence now in Belarus. So this must be stopped. And I think Speaker Johnson understands the urgency of that, but he's wrestling with his own internal politics.
Could there be any kind of amendments to this bill to get this done? And could any foreign aid for other countries be excluded for the bill to get it to pass on the floor?
There are those options. I mean, one of the things we could do is, because the bill that passed the Senate contained aid for Ukraine as well as Israel and Taiwan, and humanitarian assistance for both as well. So it was a package. In theory, you could peel off the Ukraine aid and do it separately. If you did that, it would then have to go back and pass the Senate. And that's the challenge. If we amend the bill, if we make a change to it, it's got to go back through the Senate process, which will also take time. Look, we've got a bill that was negotiated over the course of 4 months, long time, strong bipartisan support, the endorsement of the White House. If we pass that, instantaneously aid can start coming to Ukraine. It is the quickest, smartest, and best way to get this done.
Also, I would like to cover any possible threats from Russia against the United States. There have been lots of stories in the media. How do you see any imminent threat from the Russian side to the U.S. security?
Well, Russia has been, making a number of different threats. As you know, they've been subtly making threats about using nuclear weapons if the war in Ukraine doesn't go their way. There's considerable pushback against those threats, by China and India and other countries, and that seems to have calmed down. But look, Putin has used extremist language to define his mission. He claims that Russia is under threat. Russia's not under threat, okay? Russia can have Russia. They can do what they want with Russia. They just can't go invading the countries around them and trying to dictate what those countries should do in their own governments. But Putin has, made this out as some kind of attack on the Russian people. It's anything but. Again, Russia can be Russia. They just can't go messing with their neighbors. So yes, Putin has made a wide range of threats. They have also withdrawn from a number of treaties and or violated those treaties that had been signed during the Cold War. The treaty on, intermediate range ballistic missiles they pulled out of a long time ago. They pulled out of the New START treaty. So they are trying to use their nuclear arsenal as a threat on a wide range of issues, and they are trying to develop new technologies and new ways to use that threat.
There have been some stories that Russia could use nuclear weapons even in the space to attack satellites. What is your take on this threat?
It is a very real threat and very worrisome. Now, the actual information that we have on the specifics of that threat is classified. In a bizarre turn of events, the House Intelligence Committee decided to allow that information out into the broader public, but it's still classified, so I can't talk about the specifics. But there's been a number of published reports that Russia is trying to weaponize space and threaten, in a variety of different ways, the satellites not just of the United States, but of the entire world that is dependent upon those satellites. So yes, that's part of Russia's effort to try to basically use nuclear blackmail to take territory of other nations.
Could this threat persuade or convince House members to pass Ukraine aid? Could it speed up the process?
I would certainly hope so. Look, the threat from Russia could not be more obvious, could not be more real. Certainly right now, it is most present in Ukraine, but it is a threat that goes beyond Ukraine. President Putin has made it clear he wants to reconstitute a Soviet empire or a Russian empire. And if the only thing stopping him from doing that is the ability to do so, which is why it's so crucial and why this Munich Security Conference is so crucial to pull our allies together to blunt that threat, to deter that threat, to show that we are united in being willing to stand up for Ukraine and to stand up for the sovereign democratic principles of all nations.
Also, there are lots of U.S. internal politics are going on. What should Ukraine expect in case of Donald Trump's presidency and in case of dramatic change of foreign policy of the United States?
Yeah, no, it's a definite threat. And actually, we as I mentioned, we've had a number of Republicans here at the convention, at the Munich Security Conference. And the story that those Republicans are telling, and these are Republicans who support aid to Ukraine, is that when Donald Trump was president, he did, authorize javelins to go to Ukraine for defense purposes. He moved troops into Poland to try to blunt the Russian threat. And so they try to argue that despite what Donald Trump has said, he is, committed to deterring the threat from Russia.
Do you believe them?
I don't. I'm not sure exactly what that's not true. Donald Trump's worldview is very much a go-it-alone worldview. He believes that the U.S. Has not benefited from these alliances, that other countries have benefited, and we have overpaid for those alliances. I think he's completely wrong. No country in the world benefits more from global peace and stability than the United States of America. Yes, we have been the guarantors of security for much of Europe and for Japan and South Korea for, going on 70 years, and it's cost money to do that. But the stability that has come from that has benefited our economy as the largest economy in the world. So, and Donald Trump doesn't see that. He thinks that, that we've been taken, basically. It's a bad deal for us. So he wants to rework that deal and move us away from partnerships and alliances and focus only on America. Well, I think that's a huge mistake, because if you're going to focus on America, you have to focus on having partnerships and friends in order to make sure that we can meet our needs. And the other thing to understand about Donald Trump is so much of it is generated by personal ego. Who knows? I mean, if a given country offends him in one way or another, he'll rearrange his policies. He was not happy with Germany near the end of his presidency. So he ordered the military to put together a plan to pull all U.S. troops out of Germany. We have a lot of U.S. troops in Germany. We have a lot of bases in Germany.
Ramstein Air Base.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of relationships. And so he was going to rearrange it all, I guess, out of, personal pique towards Germany. So, yeah, you got to deal with that. So, no, I don't agree with my Republican colleagues that seem to think that a second Donald Trump presidency would be fine for global peace and security. It would undermine our partnerships and alliances that we have built over the course of 75 years and that have served us and the world quite well.
Russian President Putin said that he would prefer Joe Biden over Donald Trump. What do you think about this statement?
I think Putin is lying. I know that's a shocking idea, but I don't believe everything that President Putin says. He lies about a lot of things, and I think he's lying about that in order to pursue his own interests.
What is the rationale for the statement? What is the reason for his statement, in your opinion?
Well, he's trying to deflect from the fact that, if President Trump has said that he's going to abandon Ukraine, then that's what Putin wants. I think Putin is mindful of the fact that he's not popular in the United States of America. And if it appears that he is advocating for a Trump presidency, that would undermine Trump's ability to be successful. So he's trying to deflect, trying to claim that he wants a different outcome. It's sort of reverse psychology, if you will. So that's, I think, why he's lying about that.
If there is a Donald Trump presidency, has the U.S. Congress enough power to help Ukraine despite the change of the course of administration?
I don't know. I mean, I'd be lying if I told you I did. If that were to come to pass, if Donald Trump were to be elected president again, I think it would be really unpredictable exactly what would happen.
Is Donald Trump a reason why the border deal has failed?
Well, he is the reason why the border agreement that the Senate reached failed. And look, that was part of the problem with Ukraine. And this is the inconsistency of the Republican Party in our country. So, first of all, when we went to get support for Ukraine, they said, well, we can't deal with Ukraine until we deal with the U.S. border. And let me just say, the U.S. border is a huge problem for us domestically. We have a migrant crisis. It's a migrant crisis that's in much of the world, frankly. And we are being overrun by people who are fleeing various, violent, chaotic, poverty-stricken regimes. And we need to change border policy. Now, I don't think that should be linked to Ukraine aid. Because we've not been able to get a border agreement for like 30 years. So to take Ukraine aid down because of that worried me. But if you can get an agreement, fine. We do Ukraine aid, we do the border security. And that's what Republicans and Democrats in the Senate negotiated. They got a very tough border deal. And then Trump decided that it wasn't in his best political interests. So he told Republicans to kill it, and they did.
They changed their mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, they wanted a tougher border deal. They wanted an even more strict, they wanted more restrictions on people coming into the countries than was in that deal. And that's fair. That's their position. I disagree with how far they want to go, but that's their position. But the thing is, the bill that we agreed on in the Senate would have made some progress. And if they didn't think it was enough progress, they could have voted for it and said, we need to do more. And we got an election coming up in November. Vote Republican if you want even more border security. And by the way, we could have gotten Ukraine done. But the position of Speaker Johnson was we cannot do Ukraine without the border deal. And then the position of Donald Trump was we can't do Ukraine with the border deal. So, heads I win, tails you lose kind of thing. So the Senate Republicans agreed with Trump, rejected the bill that had the border deal attached to it, passed a bill that didn't have the border deal attached to it, and now the Republicans are back saying the border deal has to be attached to it. I mean, look, there is an element of the Republican Party that, and Donald Trump's perspective, that quite frankly is more supportive of Putin than anyone would like. Tucker Carlson, he is a major spokesperson for the right, and has much support amongst the Republican Party. And there he is, doing Putin's propaganda for him. There is as Liz Cheney, the former member of Congress, once put it, there is a pro-Putin caucus within the Republican Party, and they're doing everything they can to try to make sure that Putin gets his way and Ukraine isn't defended. Now, it's a small group. I'm not going to say they're a majority of the Republican Party, but right now, a majority of the Republican Party is allowing that small group to dictate Ukraine policy, and it should not be. They should give us a vote on the Ukraine bill.
Do you have any optimism on the fate of the Ukraine's aid in the Congress?
I don't like to think in terms of optimism or pessimism. I'm doing everything I can to get it passed. The optimism that I would have is the sheer number of Republicans who are committed to helping Ukraine. And it is a large number. As I said, it is a majority of the Republican Party. But thus far, they have not shown much courage in carrying out that conviction. They believe that, but they're not willing to push it and really get into direct conflict with that pro-Putin wing of their party. So I'm worried is the word I would use. I wouldn't say optimistic, wouldn't say pessimistic. I would say I am worried about whether or not Speaker Johnson will ultimately live up to the commitment that he made. He's committed to not abandon Ukraine. Will he live up to that commitment, or will he let the far right, the pro-Putin wing of the caucus, block it from down? I don't know. I'm worried about whether or not he's going to have the courage of his convictions.
Thank you, Congressman Smith, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Yes, thank you very much. And thanks to the Ukrainian people for their unbelievable courage.